These days, taking photos has become incredibly easy. Almost everyone carries a smartphone. Just pull it out of your pocket, tap the screen, and you can capture an image almost instantly. But if we go back to the old days, anyone who loved photography will remember that shooting with a film camera had a distinctive, undeniably nostalgic feeling to it. Even though digital photography dominates today, film photography remains popular among many photographers and enthusiasts. Today's story is about one of them. Mr. Preacha owned many old cameras, and to him, there was something about film photographs that modern digital cameras simply couldn't replicate. Before we get into it, please help support me by liking this video. It would mean a lot and encourage me to keep making these stories. If everyone's ready, let's get into the story. This is the story of Mr. Preacha. Mr. Preacha worked as a freelance photographer. He was in his early 30s, quiet, and mostly kept to himself. He didn't socialize much and preferred spending his free time on his hobbies rather than going out and meeting people. As mentioned before, Mr. Preacha loved working with old film cameras. Sure, shooting with film wasn't particularly convenient. There was the cost of the film itself, the cost of developing it, and the cost of printing the photographs. And unlike digital photography, mistakes couldn't simply be deleted and corrected. Every mistake meant another frame of film was wasted. But there was something about film photography that Mr. Preacha found far more charming than digital. It was the emotion captured in the image. Mr. Preacha met many customers who also appreciated the unique feeling of film photographs. One particular day, Mr. Preacha had finally managed to take a few days off from work. He had been busy for quite some time and had accumulated several rolls of undeveloped film. His small photography lab was cluttered with equipment, film canisters, and other things he had been meaning to organize. He decided to spend his time organizing the house, cleaning his small photo lab, and gradually developing the rolls that had been sitting around waiting to be processed. While he was doing this, his phone buzzed softly. Mr. Preacha picked it up and looked at the screen. A new message had come in. The message was brief. The sender wanted to hire him to photograph an old family house, to preserve the house in photographs as a memory. The location was included with the message. Mr. Preacha felt a flicker of surprise. Normally, when customers contacted him, they would start by asking how much he charged, what days he was available, and what they needed to prepare. Instead, this customer had sent only a single message and a location. Curious, Mr. Preacha entered the coordinates into a map. The house was somewhere in the old city area. For some reason, the job felt unusually interesting to him. He couldn't explain exactly why. Perhaps it was the unusual simplicity of the message. Perhaps it was the location. Or perhaps it was simply that the job seemed different from the usual photography work he received. Mr. Preacha replied and asked what kind of photographs the customer wanted and when she would like him to come. The response arrived shortly afterward. She asked if he could come that same evening. She also added something that stayed in his mind. The house, she said, looked most beautiful around dusk. Mr. Preacha found the wording slightly strange. Still, he could tell the customer really wanted him for the job. More importantly, he happened to be free, so he agreed. That evening, around 6 o'clock, Mr. Preacha drove to the house using the location the customer had sent him. It was a 2-story detached house. Trees and thick vegetation had grown around the fence, almost swallowing it completely. The house looked old-fashioned, as if it had been standing there for decades. Mr. Preacha looked around. There were no cars parked outside and no one in sight. Everything was strangely quiet. The only thing he noticed was the wooden front door, which had been left slightly ajar. Without thinking much of it, he walked straight toward the entrance. When he opened the door and stepped inside, he saw a woman standing there. She wore faded clothing that looked like traditional local dress.
"Are you Mr. Preacha?"
She greeted him politely and confirmed that he was Mr. Preacha. She thanked him for coming and introduced herself as Miss Ploy. Her voice was extremely polite and gentle. Mr. Preacha simply nodded, took out his camera and tripod, and began setting everything up for the shoot. While setting up, Mr. Preacha glanced around the house. The downstairs hall was decorated in an old-fashioned style, with wooden display cabinets, intricately carved wooden tables, and old family photographs arranged around the room. It was very strange. There was no television, no refrigerator, not even a fan, no modern amenities at all. It was as if time had frozen decades ago. As he continued inspecting the interior, the woman explained that she wanted photographs taken in several places: the central hallway, the staircase, and near the upstairs window. She said she wanted to keep them as memories. For Mr. Preacha, it didn't seem unusual. He'd been working in this field for years, and most of his clients wanted exactly this kind of photography. Mr. Preacha set up his camera and began preparing for the first shot. But once he actually started shooting, he felt something unsettling. The first thing he noticed was the silence. The house was so quiet that the ticking of an old clock in the corner could be heard clearly. He started in the central hallway, where the woman said her mother used to spend most of her time sitting and watching the sun go down. An old wooden chair stood in front of a large window. Outside, the late afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow through the glass and across the room. It was an ideal setting for a photograph, but beautiful as it looked, Mr. Preacha immediately sensed that something was wrong. The woman lowered herself into the chair. She didn't pose, she simply tilted her head from time to time or gazed out through the window. Mr. Preacha didn't say much or direct her. He assumed this was simply the kind of natural, unposed photograph she wanted. Then he noticed something stranger. Her movements were far too slow. She looked almost like a statue, carefully placed in position and left there. She remained completely still, barely moving as she breathed. He tried not to dwell on it. Maybe she was simply reserved. Maybe she felt nervous in front of the camera. Hoping to put her at ease, he gave her a small direction. "Could you move your left shoulder just a little?" What happened next unsettled him. She moved exactly as he'd asked, but the movement was unnaturally slow, almost mechanical, as if she'd never been photographed before. What bothered him even more was what happened every time he pressed the shutter. A faint sound drifted down from upstairs. It sounded like someone walking across the wooden floor above. Mr. Preacha grew increasingly uneasy. After several photographs, he finally wondered whether someone was upstairs. Was the woman really alone in the house? Finally, he asked, "Excuse me, is there anyone upstairs?" She remained silent for a moment before answering in a very soft voice. The woman quietly said that there was no one upstairs and that nobody had gone up there for a very long time. That was all she said. Then she turned her face back toward the window, as if she had no intention of explaining anything further. A chill ran down Mr. Preacha's spine, though he couldn't say exactly why. Still, he kept working. Once the hallway photographs were finished, the woman led Mr. Preacha toward the staircase and up to the second floor. The old wooden steps creaked beneath their feet. The higher they climbed, the stronger the smell of aged wood became, mixed with a thick, musty odor that seemed to have remained trapped inside the house for years. What immediately caught his attention was that every bedroom door was closed, except one, which had been left slightly open. That was the room where they would take the next set of photographs. It appeared to be the master bedroom, filled with old wooden furniture that looked decades out of date. A bed, a wardrobe, a dressing table with a large mirror, and an antique rocking chair beside the window. The woman walked past the bed and stopped at the window. Mr. Preacha positioned himself behind her and began taking photographs. The fading sunlight fell across her shoulders, catching the strands of her long hair. The scene looked strangely beautiful. To Mr. Preacha, it had the atmosphere of an old film, a photograph that seemed to belong to another time. Then, while looking through his camera, he noticed something in the reflection of the dressing table mirror. He froze. Standing behind the woman was an elderly woman. She appeared to be watching them. A short distance away, the reflection also revealed an old man sitting in the wooden rocking chair. For a moment, Mr. Preacha simply stared at the reflection, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Then he turned around. There was nobody there. The space behind the woman was completely empty. The elderly figures had disappeared, but the rocking chair remained, and it was still moving, slowly, back and forth, as though someone had only just gotten up. That was the moment Mr. Preacha decided he had seen enough. After taking the final photograph, he packed his equipment and hurried downstairs. The woman followed him and walked him to the door. Despite everything that had happened, she was still smiling. She looked completely calm. Then she said something that stayed with him long after he left.
You're the last person who will ever photograph me here. Thank you.
She pressed her hands together in a gesture of thanks, then turned and disappeared back into the house. Mr. Preacha didn't stop to think. He simply grabbed his things, opened the door, and left. That night, after returning home, Mr. Preacha couldn't shake the feeling that something had been wrong with the house from the very beginning. He kept replaying the day's events in his mind, the abandoned-looking house, the unnatural silence, the woman who moved almost like a statue, the unexplained sounds from upstairs, the figures that appeared only in the mirror, and the empty rocking chair that continued moving long after no one was sitting in it. But there was one detail he couldn't stop thinking about, the woman's final words.
You're the last person who will ever photograph me here. Thank you.
At the time, Mr. Preacha had assumed she simply meant that the house was about to be sold or demolished. He had no idea that, after developing the photographs, he would discover what she had really meant. What happened inside that house defied explanation. It was an old house that looked as if no one had lived there for years. The silence, the strangely cold air, and the woman's words that he was the last person who would ever photograph her, but above all, the elderly couple he saw in the mirror, kept replaying in Mr. Preacha's mind. But his curiosity to see the photographs outweighed his fear. Without wasting any time, he unpacked his equipment and carried the roll of film straight into his darkroom to develop it. He wanted to see if, by any chance, his camera had captured images of the elderly couple he had seen in the reflection. He carefully wound the film onto the reel, sealed the container, and poured in the chemicals. Once the process was complete, Mr. Preacha carefully removed the developed film. Under the dim orange light of the darkroom, he began examining the negatives. The first photograph showed the living room. The wooden rocking chair was exactly where he remembered it. Cool light fell across the room, creating the same eerie atmosphere he had witnessed inside the house. But the frame was empty. The woman wasn't in the chair. There was no shadow of a person, not even a reflection in the window where she should have appeared. Mr. Preacha moved on to the second photograph. This was the picture he had taken near the window, where the woman had supposedly been sitting. Again, there was no one. The space beside the window was completely empty. His heart began to pound. He flipped through the rest of the roll, one photograph after another. Every image showed only the rooms, walls, furniture, and light, but the woman appeared in none of them. It was as if no one had ever set foot inside that house. Goosebumps spread across his entire body. Never mind the elderly couple. There was something far more disturbing. The woman he had been photographing was completely absent from the photograph. There was no trace of her at all, yet he knew she had been standing right in front of him. He had spoken to her, watched her pose, and taken her picture with his own camera. He immediately picked up his phone and searched for the messages he had exchanged with the woman. He wanted to contact her and find out what had happened, but when he looked, the conversation log was gone. Her phone number was gone as well. There was no record of her, nothing. He sat silently for a long time, trying to make sense of what he had just encountered. That night, he could barely sleep. He left the lights on because he was too frightened to lie in complete darkness. But even with the lights on, sleep never really came. Every time he closed his eyes, one image returned, the wooden rocking chair, and sitting in it was an old man wearing a white sleeveless shirt. The following morning, Mr. Preacha decided to return to the house, hoping to find some explanation. Perhaps there was an ordinary explanation for everything, but when he arrived, The scene before him made the situation even more disturbing. The house looked completely abandoned, very different from the previous night when he had visited. The property was covered with fallen, dried leaves. There were no signs of recent activity. Nothing suggested that anyone had been living there. He peered through the broken windows. Inside, he could see the same central hallway with the same layout and the same old furniture. But now, everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. Mr. Preacha became even more certain that this was the same house he had entered the previous day. He stood there, stunned. As he looked around, Mr. Preacha noticed a small grocery shop near the entrance of the lane. He went inside and asked the elderly shop owner what she knew about the house. According to her, the property had been empty for a very long time. The last person known to have lived there was a woman named Ms. Ploy, but Ms. Ploy had died more than 10 years ago. That answer left Mr. Preacha speechless. It made no sense. It was the same name of the woman who introduced herself, the same woman he had met the previous night, the photographs he had taken, the messages on his phone, the house he had entered. None of it seemed to fit with what he had just learned. The following day, he placed the roll of film inside a separate box, sealed it, and never opened it again. For a long time, he tried to reconstruct the events in his mind. He remembered the woman's messages, the rooms, the furniture, taking the photographs, and the strange things he had seen inside the house. But one question remained in his mind. The woman he had photographed, was she really the ghost of a woman who had died more 10 years earlier?